Hello, everybody. This is John Carroll. I'm the editor of Endpoints News and your host today. I'm joined by Stéphane Bancel, the CEO of Moderna, the man and the company of the hour in many, many respects. And I wanted to get started by relating a small anecdote about my own personal involvement in this. Just a few days ago, I got the Moderna vaccine. It was my first shot. And this was actually the first time in 19 years of covering biopharma that I've gone from covering a company, actually from start to current 10 years later, and a program from the moment that it delivered a vaccine to the NIH all the way through to an emergency approval. And fortunately, that didn't take a lot of time. So, Stéphane, thanks. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to have a big impact on my life and, in fact, millions and millions of other people. So, I wanted to get started here with you because we've talked before about the company and your plans for the company. And initially, you really wanted to have the full pipeline and not be subjected to whether or not one particular program worked or didn't, but it really got down to that in many respects. I wanted to see if you could help explain what that was like to be a CEO of a company where there's so much attention on one product.
So John, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really glad you are vaccinated and that once you get your boost, you'll be very well protected. That's why, we all do this in this industry is we care about making medicine to help people. And that's such a great feeling and example. I get 10, 20, 40 emails some days of pictures of people getting vaccinated, friends, families, friends of friends, and that's really heartwarming. So as you said, because mRNA is a set of instructions, we've always built the company as you characterize, trying to de-risk it, having a portfolio. So we'll not be a one-track company like binary risk. And as you said, last year, it was really weird for us after working hard 10 years to build a very diversified portfolio to have everything coming down to one vaccine. And as you said, the scrutiny that were on the vaccine was just surreal. Like every move we make, everything we do, PIs talking at sites, being on the front page of New York Times the next morning, just the most weird thing that happened to us. But the piece that we're very thankful, it was an extraordinary teamwork between the remarkable job by the FDA and the guidelines and their daily, communication, the partnership with the NIH and Dr. Fauci's team, of course, the sites, our manufacturing partners, PPD, we run the study. It took an incredible team effort to get this done in such a shape. And it was really remarkable. I mean, if you think about it, in January 2020, when we started chasing the virus with a vaccine, Moderna had never run a phase 3. In 2019, we had made 100,000 doses for the entire year. Last week we shipped 10 million doses to the US government that week. And this week we're going to ship another 10 million doses. So the way the company has transformed in 12 months is just extraordinary. And it goes to this incredible team, both within the company and outside the company.
So what did it feel like? I mean, when you got the first data from the phase 3, what you were going to submit for the approval for the EUA on the vaccine, what did that feel like when you opened that up and looked at it for the first time and saw about a 95% efficacy rate?
It was an amazing feeling. Of course, we went into this, never had a vaccine going through phase 3 before. It was really a wild card. We knew the neutralizing antibody were very, very high for all the participants in the phase 1. So we had a good feeling that this was going to get somewhere. And as you know, the Pfizer vaccine, I think, read 10 days before, the Monday before, I forgot now. And so we are both hoping and a bit worried. When we heard the news from the independent, safety board on that Sunday, it was a fantastic feeling. And not only the 95%, as you mentioned, in terms of preventing disease, but for me, the most important almost was there was no severe disease. There was no hospitalization. And when you think about what has happened in this whole pandemic, including, of course, the people sick, the people in hospital, and the deaths, but also all the economic impact. I worry deeply about mental health in the country and around the world. I worry deeply about inequalities of learning that kids, in low-income families might have fallen behind last year. Most probably, people have lost their jobs and so on. So when I heard the data on that Zoom that Sunday, what really gave me a lot of hope for the world, and that we could now see the light at the end of the tunnel, is we had no severe case in the people vaccinated.
So explain to me the impact it's had on the company. Obviously, Moderna today is not the same company that it was a year ago. What kind of impact has it had on the numbers? And what kind of impact is it going to have in terms of your research and development activities going forward?
Yeah, so as you say, John, the company is totally transformed to the point that in the town hall I did with the entire company staff early January, we talked a lot about that. And I told them, I wish I could change the company name just so we all realize it's not the same company anymore. Of course, I'm very happy with company name. And of course, the Moderna brand across the country and around the world is extraordinarily positioned today, which we could not have hoped in our wildest dream, a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But the way it has changed the company, I mean, if you think about it first, it has accelerated the company becoming commercial by, I would say, 3 to 4 years. So we became commercial 3 to 4 years earlier. But then if you think about it, which is going to go to your R&D question, is we turned cash flow positive most probably 10 years before we're going to turn cash flow positive. Because when the first product was going to launch 3, 4 years from now, it will take several years, like in most product launch, to get the product break even. But then because you will still have a very big pipeline, it will take a few more years to get the entire company break even from a cash flow standpoint. But if you think about it, we are already cash flow positive. We're now every month cash flow positive. We have been in Q3 cash flow positive. We're being Q4 cash flow positive. And so we'll see what Q1 looks like, but given what we're shipping every month. And so the big change, the way I described it to employees and to our shareholders, I put a shareholder letter on January 4th. I try every year to put my shareholder letter right after, the first Monday, that Monday before JP Morgan, when we come back from New Year's break. So it's still fresh in people's mind. And what I told our stakeholders in that letter is, before we used to believe mRNA could lead to approved product. Now we know mRNA can lead to approved product. And that's a fundamental difference in our appetite to invest, because in business and in science, between believing something might happen with still a lot of risk out there compared to when you know something is going to work, is a huge difference of your risk appetite. Number one. Number two is, we used to be cash flow negative. Now we are cash flow positive. And because of that, we don't need to keep so much cash on the balance sheet. As you know, we've always been very conservative, because I believe if this company could make it to approval, it would be a platform with a huge impact on medicines for many years to come, given mRNA is an information molecule. And so I was very worried of the risk of losing the company or going bankrupt or having to do a massive down round that would have a big impact on the company psyche and the ability to do important medicines. And so we always kept 2 to 3 years of cash. We don't need to do that anymore. So we can really invest in R&D like we have never done before. And so what I think the world should expect of us is a doubling or tripling or quadrupling of our R&D investment in the months to come. We're just scaling, hiring a lot of people, starting many more programs in the labs, in the clinic, trying to accelerate program in the clinic by, increasing the size of trials or being more aggressive with the business risk we're taking to just advance this medicine faster.
So I am curious. I mean, when this first started, there were a variety of different projections in terms of how long it would take to get a vaccine. Quite a few, and some real experts were talking about years before we're likely to see a vaccine. It, in fact, was less than a year before we saw a vaccine, which is extraordinary in all sorts of ways. But is there any, and maybe that's not something that you could do every day, right? Not something that you can do if you're not following an EUA pathway. But I am curious whether it's had an impact in terms of the timelines that you normally set for developing any product, any mRNA product.
So it's a great question, John. So I do think our ability to go faster in drug development in the clinic is going to be real at the company for sure. We learn a lot of things. I think the FDA also learned a lot of things about our platform. I mean, think about the safety database we're going to have at the end of this year on our vaccine platform. We make around 1 billion doses, we're going to have around 500 million people dose. That's a nice safety database that most products never have, even in their lifetime. And so that's important. I don't think we can do the same timelines. Of course, EUA, as you know, much faster than BLA. And then the attention we had from the agency was remarkable. Sometimes we have 2 or 3 meetings in a day, John. That will take usually 2 to 3 months of scheduling meetings, then meeting again and coming back to you. Like we'll have a Zoom, at 9 o'clock with questions we had to make decisions. They'll say, okay, give us an hour or 2. They will get the right experts, come back on the Zoom with us. And this incredible collaboration to find the path to do the right thing without, of course, taking any safety risk. And then I think our ability as a company to take business risk, because unlike other biotech or pharma company, we have a platform. And so if you think about our CMV vaccine or flu vaccine, they're using exactly the same technology, the same polynucleotide, to make the message, the same enzyme, the same reactor in the same room, in the same factory, the same lipid. And so our ability to take business risk, because the piece that is remarkable about what the administration last year through Operation Warp Speed did, and I think a lot of credit that they're not getting is and I think Monsef was really the architect of it, to say, we're going to invest around 3 technologies because we don't know this virus well enough to know what's going to work best, mRNA, adeno, and recombinant protein with adjuvant. And to reduce to reduce company risk, we're going to bid on 2 companies per technology, Pfizer, Moderna, AZ, J&J, and Sanofi, Novavax. I think that was brilliant.
Well, let me ask you something. Obviously, this has been an extraordinarily successful program, probably the most successful program in biotech in its history as an industry. So I am curious whether, looking back, was there anything that you regret doing that you learned from that you're not going to do again? Was there some learning from this process that's going to help the rest of your work easier?
So I have one regret last year. And of course, I didn't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, is I regret we didn't invest more and earlier in manufacturing capacity. Because as you know, when you get through a crisis, you're boiled like a frog. It is slowly you raise the temperature. You don't have, a big thing. And the piece for us is we had never run a phase 3. We never had an approved product. And we needed to invest $1 to $2 billion in manufacturing. That if a product would have failed or the virus gone away, we could have gone bankrupt. I mean, we literally put so many resources. And so we raised, some capital on May 18 and $1.3 billion after a market close. And I have to say, an amazing partner to us has been, and I don't spend a lot of time congratulating banks, but Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley decided that day, up to the CEO and James Goldman called me, to take the entire deal and then take the risk to sell it on the market. So we could get the deal done, so we could get moving to buy raw material, buy equipment and get moving. And so we didn't spend, days marketing and so on. It's like, I'll do the whole deal. I'll do it alone. It'll be easier than with 2 banks. And he bought at 401 and the market closed $1.3 billion worth of stock that then they had the risk on their balance sheet to sell to the market. So that was really an important moment. I wish we would have done more. But at the time, if you had told me, Stéphane, you guys are going to have 95% efficacy, no severe disease, and Sanofi is going to take a 1-year delay, and the adeno are going to have, 20% lower efficacy than your product, or I said, geez, John, it would have been a different world, but of course, I didn't know that.
So you, I think, have projected that you're going to be able to deliver something like 2 billion doses by the end of next year. Tell me a little bit about what went into that process, about being able to scale that up as fast as you did, because I know that there were concerns about raw materials and other things. Has the world changed in terms of manufacturing when it comes to vaccines?
So, I mean, everybody has been investing a lot. All our suppliers in the value chain. One of the reasons we have not had, you've read in the media, some people have had lipid problems. We didn't have lipid problems because we started chasing this virus very early. In February of last year, actually end of January, I came to the conclusion, thanks to great outside scientific infectious disease experts, that this was going to be a pandemic. It was not an outbreak. When we started chasing this virus between Christmas 19 and New Year's and making the vaccine in 40 days, as you know, sending it to Dr. Fauci for a phase 1, at the beginning of that process, until kind of the week of January 20th of last year, I believe this was going to be an outbreak like SARS or MERS. And what we're basically doing is trying to figure out how quickly could we go working with the NIH in case of a real pandemic happening one day. Because I got told in September 2019 to Dr. Fauci and his team down at the NIH that I thought we could go from a sequence of a new virus to giving them clinical grade products for phase 1 in 60 days based on our robots for the personalized cancer vaccine that we have, so totally different, but again, mRNA being a platform. And they were all laughing. They thought it was just, I was crazy. It was this crazy French guy that could not 60 days, like impossible. Just to put people in context, for the first SARS, Dr. Fauci's team went from virus identification to starting a phase 1 in 20 months. So here you have these French guys that has never launched a product. So yeah, we can do it in less than 60 days. We took 42 days to do it. And so that was the start. It was going to be an outbreak. We're going to send it to NIH. We're going to run the phase 1. We're going to learn stuff. It will be good. And it will kind of get us ready for a real thing. But the week of January 20th, when I was at Davos at the World Economic Forum meeting, I had the chance to know for many years Sir Jeremy Farrar, who is the head of Wellcome Trust, and Dr. Richard Hatchett, who is the head of CEPI. They are both infectious disease docs, and they have an incredible network around the world. And through the Davos meeting, as we're going to conference room to conference room, it's a bit like a madness, like JP Morgan is for that week. We will run into each other or meet for a quick coffee between 2 meetings and text to meet somewhere. And they will share with me on their phone real-time data coming from their friend doctors in Wuhan. And we're literally on a napkin mapping R0 and the death rate we were getting from those anecdotes. And we realized Davos started on Monday night. By Wednesday night, we were like, geez, the R0 is so high. And then I'm like, by the way, guys, where is Wuhan? I know it was in China, but I didn't know the size of the city, where it was. I start to Google map Wuhan, see it's a big, satellite picture, Wikipedia of the city. I'm like, oh, geez, it's an industrial center, automobile parts and so on. And then I go to Google and I Google the flights out of Wuhan, and it's going to all the capital in Asia, all the big city on the West Coast in the US, and all the capitals in Europe. And I look up from my iPad and I look at them and like, geez, guys, it's everywhere. Because it's a 7 to 14 days in incubation time, it's a coronavirus. I'm like, it's everywhere. And with this, I do such a hard, and they say, yeah, it's everywhere now. And so I was actually supposed to be going after Davos from Zurich to Germany because I'm on the board of QIAGEN, the diagnostic company. And I woke up in sweat Saturday morning, and I emailed my assistant, Nadej, and said, Nadej, when you get up, please call me. And she called me and I said, I need a one-way ticket to DC tomorrow. Cancel everything. I called the QIAGEN CEO and the QIAGEN chairman on Saturday, telling them, I'm sorry, guys, I cannot come. It's going to be a pandemic. And I flew one-way ticket to DC, and I arrived Sunday night, Monday morning, 8 o'clock, and I flew Tony. Then I went to BARDA, and I went to DARPA, DOD. And then I went to FDA to see Marion Gruber and their team to say, okay, how can we find a way to get this thing done, in less than a year, because we don't have time. Next winter is going to be awful.
So you mentioned about the delay that Sanofi went through. It strikes me that everything's changed with the introduction of mRNAs. Not just Moderna, but also BioNTech has also played a big role here with the Pfizer partnership that they have in terms of getting out a vaccine. You two were virtually neck and neck through the whole development process and now the rolling out process. Perhaps you're a little bit more on your own as it relates to the manufacturing from what Pfizer's being able to bring into the game. But I'm kind of curious, how you see this playing out, because the vaccine industry is known for being, frankly, old and slow with, dated technology. And now it seems that the biggest players in the industry are the ones that are least capable of dealing with something quickly and effectively. What's your own take on that?
I think you're spot on, John. It is what you have seen in so many industries. You have a new technology coming up, and most of the incumbents are in denial for years, and then are the least able to cope with it. Because sometimes it might mean you need to go and disrupt your own business and destroy your own sales, which is always a difficult decision in management rooms and in boardrooms. And it's really hard to adapt new technology to your old processes. You have to think about everything differently. You have to be willing to take risk that those companies are built not to take risk. I remember, being in big pharma myself, and once you're in a company that has multi-billion-dollar products that are going to be bringing cash for years and years, you are trained not to take risks, not to break anything. When you are on the other side of a trade, like, startup, as you know, because you cover the biotech business, daily, it's all about taking risk, calculated risk, thinking about what do you do to fall back on your feet if something doesn't work your way. But it's a very different mindset. It's a very different speed. And plus, because mRNA is information, as Moderna has invested, a huge amount of money in digital and robotics and now machine learning, because our molecule is just a piece of information. And so the whole company is fully digitalized. I mean, the plant in Norwood, the reason we can go so fast, I mean, look at last year, 42 days to make a product. This year, the variants from South Africa that we sent to NIH a week ago, and we started dosing humans in our phase 2 ourselves on Wednesday this week. It took around 30 days. And so
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Those companies, if you want, are not at all equipped to deal with such a disruption and willing to bet the farm behind it. And so I think the vaccine business, as you say, has been an oligopoly of 4 companies, 2 in Europe, and 2 in the US. If you look at it today, Pfizer is the only of the big companies that has taken risk and helped the world. The 3 other big pharma companies in vaccines have not contributed to helping with the pandemic.
So, looking ahead, I wonder whether the world's changed its perspective on pandemics as a whole because this has happened. I think that every year there was some sort of a scare about a coronavirus or something coming along, SARS, et cetera, that could trigger a pandemic, but we actually haven't had one. This is the worst healthcare crisis that the world's faced in 100 years since the Spanish flu. So I'm curious, I wanted to get your perspective here in terms of what happens next time. First, does the world actually change the way it approaches pandemics and prepare in advance? And the next time around, provided that there is a next time around within our lifetimes, how does that play out? I mean, will we see something faster than we saw this time around?
So I think the governments have really been traumatized because, I mean, the human suffering, as you say, has been just something we've never seen in our lifetime. And so I think and hope through the discussions I'm having with head of states and health ministers around the world, that there's a lot of things they are doing to help. Even look at now, the world is realizing with variants that very few countries can sequence, including the US, by the way, at a massive level. And so I think there's going to be a lot of investment made across the world in sequencing. The Wellcome Trust is giving a lot of grants to give sequencers to the emerging world, the Gates Foundation, and so on. So I think a lot of things are going to happen between governments, industry, and not-for-profit to learn. The question is how sustained it will be. Because look, we had masks in warehouses that were out of date. So I don't know what the governments will do to sustain this. On the vaccine front, I believe next time we can go faster by most probably cutting the time in half. But this is what will be required. And I'm having quite a number of discussions with governments, both in this country and around the world, to get this done. If you think about it, a next pandemic will come from a virus we know. We knew coronaviruses, they were not new. They are, causing the common flu. Most probably they were a long time ago, those viruses causing common flu. They were pandemics hundreds of years ago, most probably. And there are around 20 viruses. If you ask, again, the experts, Dr. Fauci, Sir Jeremy Farrar, you ask them, there's a list that is well known by infectious disease scientists of around 20 pathogens of concern. That a new outbreak or a new pandemic will be what? Will be a mutation from one of those. It's going to be a new virus that we don't know that's flying from Mars and that's going to fall on the Earth and create a new pandemic. It's going to be, we've always thought it was going to be a new flu strain. It ended up to be a corona strain. And so I think what the world should do, and I'm working really hard to get this done, is to invest, to do preclinical work and phase 1, phase 2 on those existing 20 virus families of concern. Ebola, flu, Zika, just take the whole list. Run phase 1, 2s. If you look at the budget of preclinical phase 1 and 2, it's around $20 million per virus. It's nothing. It's $400 million in the whole thing. At the global scale, it's a couple of peanuts. And if you were to do that, this will allow you, when you have a new variant coming, like let's say if we had done SARS with a phase 1/2 mRNA platform, or MERS, which we were starting off doing with Dr. Fauci. We already done the preclinical work. You already know the dose at which you need to go. Because every antigen is different, but if you look at the dose of all of our vaccines, usually give very high neutralizing antibody between 25 and 100 micrograms across the entire platform over 8 or 10 we have done so far in the clinic. So we have to do a dose for every one of those 20 and put this on ice. What you could have done, I'm taking the timeline of last year for SARS-CoV-2, you could have gone straight into a phase 3. If you had the dose you knew for phase 1, the safety database for that pathogen of 600-700 people that you can get to the FDA. Plus, remember now, we're going to have hundreds of millions of people with our vaccine platform dosed through just this vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine. And convince the FDA that you know the dose from your phase 1, and you go straight into a phase 3. We could have started a phase 3 in March 16 last year. The phase 3 would have been done by July. So if you had done that on the clinical side and on the manufacturing side, if you had that manufacturing scale, which now we have, and start at business risk, i.e. the government start to give us capital to say, I'm giving you an order for 200 million doses, and you crank 40 million doses a month or 50 million doses a month from January to July, that would have been 300 million doses, assuming 50 a month, in a warehouse in July by the time of EUA. So that in that parallel world, which I think it can happen in the future, you could have in the July timeframe, so around 6 months from first sequence of a virus of concern, you could have 300 million doses in a freezer that you could literally put on trucks and think about how the fall of 2020 will have looked like in the winter if we have had through the July, August, September timeframe, 150 million Americans vaccinated.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because the way the vaccines are being rolled out right now is basically according to affluence. I mean, you have the richest country, the United States, probably front of the line. You have the European countries coming after that, paying for the vaccines and providing a good deal of revenue for the company. Do you think that the world has to change its approach to how vaccines are distributed so that poor countries are not left so far behind the wealthy countries?
Oh, very much so. I think it's one of those things that has been a big learning is there was no mechanism to do that. What COVAX is working at doing and just starting doing in a few countries now, more than a year after the pandemic, there was no mechanism. It's not the G20, it's not the G7, it's not the WHO. So there was no mechanism for even us industry to go to one place and to say, okay, how many vaccines do you want to buy? What risk are you willing to take when? Because if you think about it, I mean, Europe, as we've seen, is materially, I would say, around 3 months behind the US. And it's because, in my opinion, Europe took way too long to decide to get the vaccine and was conservative to start doing the first contract with existing technologies, which were the one that are the most behind. Whereas the US did the 6 that we talked about, in parallel by a week or two and just get moving in parallel. And so I think you need a body that has both access to capital, because for us industry, when the virus emerged to take all those risks, we need help because a lot of time those things are not going to pan out. They're not going to be a pandemic, which is awesome. We're not looking for pandemic, none of us. But when you think about the amount of capital that has to be deployed to make the products, to buy raw material, to hire the people, and so on and so forth, we're talking in the many, many billions of dollars. So you need almost to have a COVAX thing that is sustainable. And I think, because CEPI and Gavi are very involved into this, is you need things that don't go away, that can be used, for example, to deliver a regular vaccine like flu and other things, or children vaccine, because you need to be able to turn it on the switch. I mean, the problem with COVAX and setting it up from scratch and getting the money and the governments and everything, it has been very painful for that team. I talk to them a lot. I mean, I make the first proposal to COVAX for tiered pricing of our vaccine back last August. I sent myself an email with 3 prices for different high-income, middle-income, low-income countries to COVAX leadership last August. We've answered a tender to UNICEF just before Christmas, because UNICEF is being used by COVAX as the procurement arm to buy physically and get delivery of the vaccine. And we still don't have a partnership. So just think about the very precious time that is being wasted because there was nothing and everything is being built. So that's another piece that the world needs to do, is to build the right structure to take care of all the countries and to keep it alive and to keep it functional. So if we need it, it can start working from day one.
Okay. Well, Stéphane, we've run out of time. It's been fascinating, as always, talking to you about this. This is probably the most important thing going on in the world today as it relates to biopharma, and always something that we're paying very close attention to. Very much appreciate you taking the time out between discussions with various heads of state about supplies of vaccine. It's been great. It's been great for us and hopefully everybody at the conference as well. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, John. Stay safe.
You too.